Mark Zuckerberg wasn't the kind of man who wandered. His days existed inside blocks of time, precise, efficient, optimized. Meetings, calls, briefings, product reviews. Even his runs were scheduled to the minute. But that evening, something felt heavier than usual, like the air inside his office had turned stale. He stood by the glass wall of his Palo Alto home, staring at the quiet street outside. The city hummed in the distance, a low, constant echo of invention. He could almost hear the heartbeat of Silicon Valley pulsing beneath it all, but none of it felt alive to him that night. It just felt mechanical. He closed his laptop, left his phone face down on the table, and walked out without telling anyone. No destination, no assistant, no car waiting at the curb, just a hoodie, sneakers, and his own thoughts, something he hadn't been alone with in a long time. The evening air greeted him with a chill, the kind that wakes you up without asking permission. The streets were lined with glowing windows, people eating dinner, laughing, existing outside the digital world he'd helped build. He noticed details he usually missed: the creak of a bicycle passing by, the smell of fresh-cut grass, the way the light from a cafe spilled onto the sidewalk like a small stage. For the first time in months, he wasn't thinking about Meta, about VR headsets, or about the endless race to the next big thing. He was just walking, and it felt strangely unfamiliar. As he turned a corner near a small park, something on the ground caught his attention. A glint of brown leather near a bench, almost hidden beneath fallen leaves. He paused, squinted, and took a few steps closer. It was a wallet, worn, scuffed, clearly used for years. He picked it up, brushing off the dust. There was no one around, just the faint sound of crickets and the glow of a streetlight flickering overhead. Mark turned it over in his hands. It wasn't anything expensive, no sleek card holder, no designer brand. Just a normal wallet that had clearly lived a life. He slipped a finger inside, pulling out a few folded bills, a driver's license, and a creased piece of paper that had been tucked behind a photo. Something about it made him stop. It wasn't data. It wasn't numbers. It was someone's life, small, tangible, forgotten. And for the first time in a long while, Mark Zuckerberg didn't think about how to analyze it. He just felt it. He sat down on the park bench, the wallet resting in his hands. The air had grown colder, the kind of chill that settled in your chest if you stayed too still. Streetlights flickered on one by one, washing the park in soft orange light. Inside the wallet were the usual things: a worn driver's license, a few crumpled $20 bills, a coffee shop punch card with 5 stamps on it, a photo of a woman and a little girl, maybe 6 years old, smiling in front of what looked like a birthday cake. But behind the photo, folded carefully in half, was a small piece of paper, yellowed and bent at the corners. Mark hesitated. It didn't feel right to open it. This wasn't his. Yet curiosity, or maybe something else, kept his fingers moving. He unfolded the paper, slow and careful. It was a letter, written in uneven handwriting, the kind a child makes when trying too hard to be neat. The ink was slightly smudged, as if the writer had pressed down too hard or cried while writing. "Dear Daddy, I miss you. Mommy says you're very brave and that you're helping people. I hope you're warm and safe. I'm keeping your hat on my bed so it doesn't forget you. Mommy says we'll see you soon, but I don't know when. I drew this for you. Love, Emma." A small drawing was attached, a stick figure family, a tall man in a uniform, a woman, and a little girl holding a red balloon. The kind of simple, innocent picture that said everything words couldn't. Mark stared at it for a long time. The world around him seemed to blur, like he'd stepped out of time for a moment. He looked back at the ID. The name was Daniel Owens. Address, East Palo Alto. Military ID tucked behind it. The pieces connected slowly. A soldier, probably deployed, maybe struggling to stay afloat back home. He ran his thumb across the photo again. The edges were worn smooth, the way things get when someone takes them everywhere. A strange feeling stirred in him, something between sadness and recognition. For years, his world had revolved around building systems to connect people. But this small, human moment, felt more connected than anything he'd coded. He glanced around, half expecting someone to appear and claim it. But the park was empty, silent except for the soft hum of distant traffic. He looked down at the wallet again. He could turn it in, simple, efficient, responsible. But a part of him resisted that. Because somewhere out there was a woman named Mommy and a little girl named Emma, waiting for someone who might not come home soon. And for the first time in years, Mark Zuckerberg felt something that had nothing to do with data, growth, or innovation. He felt a pull, the quiet, unmistakable urge to do something human. Mark sat there for a while, the wallet balanced on his knees, the letter still open in his hands. The paper trembled slightly in the breeze, brushing against his fingers like it wanted to remind him that this wasn't just paper. This was someone's world folded into a few fragile creases. He looked at the handwriting again, childish, uneven, full of effort. He could picture her sitting at a kitchen table, tongue pressed to her lip, drawing the little balloon beside her family. And then the mother, gently folding it, tucking it away, hoping her husband would see it one day. He closed the wallet and exhaled. The obvious thing would have been to take it to the nearest police station. Log it. File it. Let the system handle it. That's what efficiency demanded. But something in him refused. It wasn't logic, it was instinct. A quiet voice, one he rarely listened to anymore, whispered, "Find them yourself." He looked up at the night sky. No stars tonight, just the dull glow of the city pressing against the clouds. He could hear a train somewhere far away, rhythmic, distant, alive. When was the last time he'd done something not because it was strategic, but simply because it mattered? He couldn't remember. Mark stood up slowly, slipping the wallet into his hoodie pocket. As he walked home, he caught his reflection in a dark shop window, the face everyone knew, the one tied to every headline and algorithm. But tonight it felt smaller, quieter, almost human again. At home, he set the wallet on his kitchen counter and stared at it. His phone buzzed with notifications, emails, updates, messages from staff, but he didn't touch it. He just kept looking at the wallet. He thought of the girl, of the soldier, of the mother. Somewhere out there, they were missing someone, worrying about something. And somehow, this little object, lost, forgotten, had found its way into his hands. He whispered to himself, barely audible, "Let's see what we can do." The next morning, he walked into his office before sunrise. His assistant looked up, surprised. "You're early, sir. You have a meeting in." "Cancel it," he said. "I need a few hours." She hesitated. "Is it meta-related?" He gave a faint smile. "No, not this time." And for the first time in years, Mark Zuckerberg started a project that wasn't built for profit, growth, or engagement. It was built for one thing only, to give a little girl her father's wallet back. The next few hours felt strangely unfamiliar, like he was living inside someone else's day. There were no meeting notes, no whiteboards filled with arrows and diagrams, no KPI charts or product metrics. Just a single goal written in his notebook: find the owner. Mark sat in his quiet office, the blinds still closed, the morning light creeping through the cracks. He spread the contents of the wallet out carefully on his desk: the ID, a couple of receipts, the folded letter, and the photo of the woman and the girl. He zoomed in on the address printed on the driver's license: East Palo Alto. Not far, just a 15-minute drive from his home. A modest neighborhood, old houses, tight-knit families, people who didn't talk about algorithms, but about bills, groceries, and rent. He hesitated. He knew he could hand this off to someone: a driver, a security officer, even a community rep from Meta. But it didn't feel right. The wallet hadn't landed in his hands by accident. He wanted to see where it came from. Mark opened his laptop, but not for code or reports. He typed the name from the ID, Daniel Owens. A few results popped up: an old Facebook account, a LinkedIn page that hadn't been updated in years, and a mention in a local news post: Staff Sergeant Daniel Owens, currently deployed overseas. He clicked it open, reading about the small group of local veterans serving in Afghanistan. The article was 3 months old. Daniel's photo was there, the same eyes as the little girl in the drawing. Mark leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen. So the wallet didn't just belong to someone nearby. It belonged to someone half a world away. Someone whose family was probably struggling more than that single letter could say. He scrolled further and found a fundraiser link. One of those simple community posts with a few donations and comments of support. The goal wasn't high, but it still wasn't met. Helping the Owens family stay afloat while Daniel serves, the description read. Mark's chest tightened. He looked at the donation page. The last contribution was 3 weeks ago. $50. Then nothing. He sat in silence for a while, just listening to the low hum of his computer. It would be easy to click donate. It would be even easier to wire $10,000 from one of his foundations. But that would make this just another transaction. He didn't want this to be a transaction. He wanted it to mean something. So he picked up the wallet again, feeling the soft wear of the leather, and whispered to himself, "Okay, Daniel Owens, let's make sure your family's okay until you're home." He closed the computer, slipped the wallet back into his pocket, and stood up. For the first time in years, Mark Zuckerberg wasn't building a network. He was becoming part of one. It was still early when Mark left the office. The sun had barely climbed over the rooftops, painting the sky in a pale mix of blue and gold. He wore his usual hoodie and jeans, the kind of outfit that made him nearly unrecognizable outside of conferences and interviews. No car service this time, no assistants trailing behind. Just him, a wallet, and a sense of purpose that didn't come from a calendar notification. East Palo Alto was quiet that morning. The neighborhood was small, modest, rows of old houses with porches covered in flower pots and chipped paint. There were kids' bicycles leaning against fences, laundry lines swaying gently in the breeze, the faint smell of pancakes coming from someone's kitchen. It felt human, unpolished, real. He parked a few blocks away and walked the rest of the distance. The address on the license led him to a small, one-story home with faded green shutters and a worn mailbox. A paper heart was taped to the front window. "Welcome home, Daddy." The edges had begun to curl like it had been waiting too long. Mark stood there for a moment, the wallet heavy in his hand. He could hear faint laughter from inside, a woman's voice and a child's. He took a deep breath and knocked gently. The door opened halfway. A woman appeared, tired eyes, hair pulled back, wearing an oversized sweatshirt. She looked cautious at first, then curious. "Hi," Mark said softly, holding up the wallet. "I think this belongs to your husband." Her eyes widened. She gasped and took it with shaking hands. "Oh my God, where did you find this?" "Near the park," he said. "By the bench. I wasn't sure who it belonged to at first, but I saw the photo." She pressed a hand to her mouth. "He lost it before he deployed. We thought it was gone for good." Her daughter peeked from behind her legs, the same little girl from the photo, holding a worn teddy bear. She looked up at Mark with wide eyes. "Did you find Daddy's letter too?" He nodded. "I did. It's safe." The woman's eyes welled up with tears. "You have no idea what this means. He carried that everywhere." Mark smiled faintly, unsure how to respond. "It's a special letter." She invited him in, hesitant but grateful. The living room was small, clean but clearly lived in. Children's drawings taped to the fridge, a half-finished puzzle on the table, the kind of quiet chaos that comes from real life. On a shelf above the fireplace sat a photo of Daniel in uniform, smiling proudly beside his family. "He's coming home in 6 months," she said, her voice softening. "We're counting the days." Mark nodded, studying the photo. He didn't tell her who he was. Didn't need to. He just listened as she spoke about the long nights, the bills, the uncertainty. There was something humbling in it, a kind of strength that didn't need headlines. When he finally stood to leave, she handed him back the wallet. "You should keep it. For now. Maybe you can send it to him when he returns. It'll mean more that way." He hesitated, then nodded. "All right. I'll make sure it gets back to him." As he walked back down the path, the little girl called out from the porch, waving her teddy bear. "Tell Daddy we miss him." Mark turned, smiled, and said, "I will." And as he got into his car, he realized something simple. In a world obsessed with virtual connections, that small, real moment felt more powerful than any platform he'd ever built. That night, Mark couldn't sleep. He sat in his study with the wallet on the desk beside him, the photo of Daniel's family staring back in the soft glow of his desk lamp. The woman's words echoed in his head. "He's coming home in 6 months." 6 months. For most people, that was just another stretch of time. For them, it was survival. He opened his laptop, but didn't go to Facebook. Instead, he opened a blank document and began typing. Not code, not strategy, just thoughts. Ideas that didn't fit into slides or data models. He wrote down what he'd seen. The house, the tired smile, the way the little girl held that teddy bear like it was armor. The photo on the wall. The paper heart on the window, curling from the sun. He couldn't stop thinking about how the woman hesitated when she spoke about her husband, how she'd said, "We're counting the days," but her voice had a tremor that sounded like worry. He knew what that meant. It wasn't just waiting, it was struggling. He checked the family's fundraiser page again. The donations were still frozen. Rent, bills, food. They were probably barely keeping up. He sat back and exhaled. He'd built one of the most powerful companies in the world, connecting billions of people instantly. But now he realized something painful. Connection didn't always mean care. Mark didn't want to just click a button and disappear behind a username. He wanted to do something real. He pulled out his phone and texted his personal assistant. Just one message. Find me a rental property near East Palo Alto. Quiet neighborhood. I'll explain in the morning. The next day, when she asked why, he simply said, it's for someone who doesn't need attention, just a break. By the afternoon, he had it arranged. The lease was signed, the deposit paid, and the rent was covered. Not for a month, not for 3, but for 6. He made sure the payments were routed through a charity account under a different name. No traceable credit, no public record. Then he wrote a note. Simple, typed, and signed. Your rent has been taken care of for the next 6 months. No strings, no debts. Just a reminder that good things can still find you, even when you're not looking for them. He sealed it in an envelope and placed the house key from the new rental property inside. On the front, he wrote only, for the Owens family. When the courier asked for a return address, Mark smiled slightly and shook his head. None, he said. It's from a friend. That night, as he turned off the light and finally allowed himself to rest, he realized something he hadn't felt in years, the quiet satisfaction of helping someone without anyone knowing. No metrics, no virality, no algorithm, just a simple act that didn't need the internet to exist. 3 days later, the Owens family received an envelope in the mail. No sender, no logo, just their names written neatly across the front. The mother, Sarah, almost tossed it aside with the rest of the bills, thinking it was another notice. But something about the handwriting made her pause. It looked deliberate, careful. She sat down at the small kitchen table and slid a finger under the seal. Inside was a short typed letter and a single key. Her daughter, Emma, leaned on her arm, curious. Your rent has been taken care of for the next 6 months. No strings, no debts. Just a reminder that good things can still find you, even when you're not looking for them. Sarah blinked, reading it twice. Then again. Mommy, what does it mean? Emma asked softly. Sarah stared at the paper, her mind racing. No company name, no contact info. Just that message, and a key. She looked at the keychain and saw a small tag with an address only a few blocks away. She frowned. I don't know. That afternoon, she walked to the address written on the tag. Emma skipped beside her, holding her hand. When they reached the house, Sarah froze. It was a small, cozy rental, freshly painted, with a for lease sign half taken down. She peeked through the window. Inside, she saw furniture, not new, but clean and comfortable. A couch, a dining table, even a few toys in the corner. Her throat tightened. This can't be real, she whispered. Emma tugged her sleeve. Mommy, can we live here? Sarah didn't answer. She was too busy trying to hold back tears. Later that evening, she called the landlord. The number was on the sign. A kind voice answered. Hi, she began hesitantly. This is Sarah Owens. Someone sent me a key to your property. Oh, the landlord replied with warmth. Yes, I was told you'd call. Everything's been arranged. 6 months paid in advance. It's yours if you want it. Sarah sat there in silence. Do you know who? The landlord chuckled softly. All I was told was, it's from a friend. She covered her mouth, a mix of disbelief and gratitude rushing through her. That night, she packed a few boxes. When Emma asked again who the gift was from, Sarah smiled through tears and said, from someone who believes in kindness. Across town, Mark sat at his kitchen table, scrolling absent-mindedly through unread emails. He stopped when he saw a new Facebook post shared by a local community group. A family in East Palo Alto received 6 months of free housing from an anonymous donor. The note simply said, from a friend. He read it twice, not because he needed to, but because he wanted to feel it. Then he closed his laptop, leaned back, and smiled. No hashtags, no headlines, no story, just the quiet proof that sometimes the smallest code you write, human kindness, runs the deepest. A week later, Mark found himself sitting in a cafe he used to visit when Facebook was still a startup, back when everything felt small, uncertain, and human. He had his laptop open, but instead of dashboards or reports, he was reading something else entirely. Hundreds of comments beneath the post about the Owens family. People were sharing their own stories, strangers offering groceries, landlords forgiving rent, someone in another state covering a single mom's medical bill. All inspired by an anonymous note that simply said, "From a friend." Mark smiled faintly. He hadn't expected this. He didn't plan it. He hadn't even wanted anyone to find out. But somehow, good had multiplied all on its own, like a quiet chain reaction the algorithms could never measure. He took a sip of his coffee and leaned back, listening to the low chatter around him. For once, the sound of people talking, really talking, felt more valuable than any metric of engagement he'd ever seen. A young man at the next table was showing the post to his girlfriend. "See this?" he said. "This is the kind of stuff that makes you believe again." Mark smiled to himself and looked out the window, pretending not to listen. His phone buzzed on the table, dozens of notifications, messages, news alerts. One headline caught his eye. "Anonymous donor helps local family. Internet calls him a real-life hero." He quickly turned the screen face down. He didn't need to read it. The whole point was not to be seen. That evening, he returned to the same park bench where he'd found the wallet. The air was cooler now, the light softer. He sat there for a long while, watching the world move quietly around him. Kids ran by with scooters, a couple walked their dog, someone strummed a guitar in the distance. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, the letter, the one from Emma. The paper was worn now, creased from being opened too many times. "I hope you're warm and safe. I'm keeping your hat on my bed so it doesn't forget you." He smiled, his chest tightening. There was something about that line, so innocent, so unfiltered, that reminded him why he started connecting people in the first place. Not for scale, not for profit, not for progress, but for moments like this, moments that didn't need to be shared to be real. Before leaving, he slipped the letter back into the wallet, now safely tucked in an envelope addressed to Daniel Owens. He didn't write a return address, just 3 words in the corner. From a friend. And for the first time in years, Mark felt like he wasn't building the world. He was finally living in it. 2 months passed before the letter reached its destination. Somewhere in a dusty military base overseas, a soldier named Daniel Owens opened a small, weathered envelope handed to him by a logistics officer. There was no sender, no stamp except for the faint mark of international mail. Inside, a folded piece of paper and his old wallet. He froze. The leather was familiar, scuffed, creased, marked by years of use. His throat tightened as he opened it, finding everything exactly where it had been. The photo of Sarah and Emma, the drawing, and the letter he thought he'd lost forever. "Your rent has been taken care of for the next 6 months. No strings, no debts. Just a reminder that good things can still find you, even when you're not looking for them." Daniel sat down heavily on the edge of his bunk, the noise of the bass fading around him. He reread the words again and again. Then he unfolded the child's letter, the one he'd written back to in his mind 100 times, but never received a reply to. Tears filled his eyes before he could stop them. He hadn't cried since boot camp. But there was something about that small act, someone caring enough to find his family, to help them quietly, that broke through the armor every soldier wears. His roommate, a younger corporal, looked up. "You good, man?" Daniel smiled faintly, still staring at the letter. "Yeah," he said, voice cracking. "Just found something I didn't think I'd ever see again." That night, under the dim yellow light of the barracks, Daniel wrote a new letter, not to his wife, not to his daughter, but to whoever had sent the wallet back. "I don't know who you are, or how you found us, but thank you. You didn't just give me back my wallet, you gave me back peace. Knowing my family's okay, that's everything. Whoever you are, thank you for reminding me that the world still has good people in it." He folded the letter, sealed it, and wrote only one line on the front. To a friend. When he handed it to the mail clerk the next morning, he didn't include a return address. He just smiled, saluted, and said, "It'll find its way." And back in Palo Alto, halfway across the world, Mark sat at his desk in silence, staring at his screen as a notification pinged, a scanned letter forwarded quietly by his assistant. He opened it, read it once, then closed his eyes and whispered, "You're welcome, Daniel." For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like a CEO. He just felt like a friend. A few weeks later, Mark was sitting in his office when his assistant, Claire, quietly knocked on the door. "There's someone here to see you," she said hesitantly. "He didn't make an appointment, but I think you'll want to meet him." Mark frowned slightly. Who is it? Claire smiled. He says his name is Daniel Owens. Mark froze. The name felt almost unreal, like a voice from another world. He stood slowly, smoothing the crease of his hoodie, and walked toward the lobby. There, standing near the reception desk, was a tall man with a soldier's posture, sturdy, sunburned, and wearing a neatly pressed shirt that didn't quite fit the corporate setting. His left hand rested on a cane, his right clutched a small envelope. When Daniel saw him, he straightened. "Mr. Zuckerberg?" Mark nodded, speechless for a moment. "You found me." Daniel gave a small, warm smile. "Actually, I wasn't looking for you, but I wanted to thank whoever sent this." He held up the same envelope, the one that once read from a friend. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then Mark gestured to a nearby seating area. "Let's sit." They sat across from each other, the billionaire and the soldier, two men from completely different worlds, bound together by a single act of kindness. Daniel took a breath. "When I opened that wallet and saw what you did for my family, I didn't know what to think. I thought maybe it was a mix-up or some kind of charity program. But then my wife showed me the note. No name, just a message." He looked down, his voice softening. "Sir, I've seen a lot of bad in this world. But that letter reminded me there's still good left." Mark's throat tightened. He wanted to say something profound, something about humanity and technology, but all that came out was, "You don't have to thank me." Daniel smiled again. "That's the thing I do. Not just for the money, for the reminder, for making my daughter believe in good people again." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small drawing, a new one, done in the same uneven handwriting as before. It showed a family of 3 standing together under a bright sun. In the corner, a 4th figure, drawn simply, smiling, standing apart, was labeled friend. Mark stared at it, the edges of his vision blurring for a moment. He didn't even try to hide the emotion this time. Daniel stood, extending his hand. "You didn't have to do it, but you did. That means something." Mark shook his hand firmly. "It meant something to me too." And as Daniel walked away, disappearing into the crowd outside, Mark looked down at the drawing again, the little stick figure labeled friend. For the first time in years, he realized that being remembered didn't require followers, fame, or a feed, just a heart and a choice to use it. That night, Mark sat alone in his home office, the new drawing propped against his computer monitor. The little stick figure labeled friend stared back at him with a simplicity that cut through all the noise. He thought about everything that had happened. The wallet, the walk, the family, the letter. None of it had been planned. None of it was recorded, tracked, or optimized. And yet, somehow, it felt like the most meaningful thing he'd done in years. He leaned back in his chair, the glow of the monitor lighting his face. For once, he didn't feel like the man running the biggest social network on Earth. He felt like a person who'd finally remembered why connection mattered. No likes, no metrics, just a drawing from a child who saw him as a friend. A month later, Mark drove through East Palo Alto again. No security detail, no press, just him in a simple car, watching the sun set over the quiet rows of homes. He parked a few houses away and sat for a while, engine off, windows down. In the distance, he saw Emma playing in the front yard, chasing bubbles, her laughter echoing down the street. Her mother was on the porch, waving to a neighbor. The house looked brighter now, not newer, not richer, just alive. Mark smiled. He didn't step out. He didn't need to. Some moments were meant to stay unseen. He looked at the little drawing on his dashboard, the one Daniel had given him, and whispered, almost to himself, "Keep that smile safe, Emma." Then he started the car and drove away slowly, disappearing into the glow of the evening traffic. He never told anyone what he'd done. There was no post, no article, no speech. But every few months, quietly and without a word, he still checked in, made sure the rent was paid, the lights stayed on, and that the little house in East Palo Alto kept its warmth. Because sometimes, the most powerful connection in the world is the one no one ever sees.